Eldrazi. Players one game apiece. We are going to go to a third game between them. Now this, from what I know, this is one of the matchups where Bant has struggled.
Well, if you were wondering the number of Rest in Peace in Vanderwall's sideboard, that number is 4, which suggests that you are right. It is a matchup where he feels that he needs sideboard action.
4 Rest in Peace, 3 Graph Digger's Cage. Oh my goodness.
So the Cage is nice because you can find it with Ancient Stirrings, and the Rest in Peace is nice because it's literally unbeatable.
It's unreal that it's so many cards in a sideboard. Like, well, I'm not good against graveyard decks, but I got this stack of cards in my sideboard. So, I mean, what's interesting is once you have 7 cards like that, 7 Trump style, like cards that trump a matchup, you can just mulligan to one of them.
Yes.
You could ship every hand that does not have a Rest in Peace or Graph Digger's Cage, and that's totally reasonable.
And I like this approach to sideboarding specifically for Bant Eldrazi, because it's a deck that wins or loses fundamentally strategically, so you just choose a small number of matchups you want to beat with your sideboard.
So I'm going to pause you here. I think Frank was trying to do that. He has mulliganed to 4 in our third game. We'll see how this goes. Brushland from Frank. Kent then plays Conflagrate for 0.
Well, I believe he picked up Rest in Peace off the top, presumably keeping on 4 because there were lands.
And he Rest in Peaces Kent.
He's got enough hits where drawing into it, within turn 1, 2, or 3 was totally reasonable with Ancient Stirrings and a Graph Digger's Cage, or just the 4 copies of Rest in Peace.
We've seen Tom Ross win through a Leyline of the Void. Can Kent Ketter do the same?
Yeah, so it's going to really depend on what Vanderwall is able to do to follow this up.
All right, we're going to have a judge call here just for a second.
So when you cast, when Rest in Peace enters the battlefield, it's a trigger to exile all graveyards. I assume the question is whether or not this trigger was announced.
Frank has to say it. He has to say exile the graveyards.
Right.
There's this issue where Kent physically moved the card with his fingers. So, yeah, we'll see what the judge ruling is on here.
That's something to certainly keep in mind.
Ken Burrow L2 as the table judge making the call here.
It looks like they have a resolution here. Ken Burrow will always set things right.
Looks like the Conflagrate will stay in the sideboard. We go over to Kent. He goes ahead and plays Gemstone Mine and passes. Unlikely to matter. I mean, he still now can flash it back.
Ooh, a second Rest in Peace will solve that problem.
There we go. Now we're thinking, okay, exile the graveyard. You got it.
It'll also make it really difficult for Kent to solve this problem. Looks like
he had 1 Nature's Claim in his hand.
That will not solve 2 Rest in Pieces.
Cathartic Reunion from Kent. And what I'm interested in here is whether he was going to discard away, whether he's going to try to find a second Nature's Claim or discard the first.
Yeah, he has 2 Prized Amalgam in hand. Game plan is just going to start hard casting Nessian Courser and hope that it's able to beat this mulligan to 4.
Cavern of Souls from Frank. He passes. Kent did not find his land there, but draws, and now he does. So, Blackcleave Cliffs makes a blue mana off the Gemstone Mine, plays Prized Amalgam. Here's a 3/3.
Against specifically a mulligan to 4, it's going to be difficult for Frank to get the requisite mana to start casting Thought-Knot Seers and Reality Smashers, but once he gets there, it's not going to be very difficult to beat these 3/3s.
You see Ancient Stirrings from Frank. He's got 3 lands, looking for more, has a Reality Smasher in hand. He will select Temple Garden off the Ancient Stirrings.
Okay, would have loved an Eldrazi Temple, though he does already have plenty of colorless mana sources. Just more lands are good finds.
Draw is Cathartic Reunion again for Kent. Swings with Prized Amalgam. Keep in mind that Gemstone Mine only has 1 more mining counter left on it. After that, Kent will have no more blue mana.
In his hand, he has Narcomoeba, double Bloodghast, and Prized Amalgam. Given the mana he has access to, he can only cast any of these cards with that mine counter.
Cathartic Reunion, discarding Narcomoeba and Bloodghast. An interesting line. I was wondering if he was going to make this play or just play another Amalgam.
I would be inclined to maybe cast the Amalgam this turn and Reunion on the following turn.
And Kent has drawn an Abrupt Decay. Graph Digger's Cage from Frank.
This is sort of the issue you run into when you board in this number of copies of the same effect.
Frank down to 11. He is 1 land away from the Reality Smasher.
So we could see Kent Ketter cast something like a Stinkweed Imp, which Reality Smasher can't block.
All right, Gemstone Mine gone. Here is another prized amalgam. Kent having another land. It's a mountain. Draw is from Frank. He'll pass. Yeah, I mean, you have to stress that this was a mulligan to 4.
And
Frank down to 5 right now.
once Kent discards Nature's Claim to Cathartic Reunion, and Frank casts second Rest in Peace, Grafdigger's Cage, this is like a mulligan to 2.
Yeah.
This is just redundancy that does not matter.
A third Cathartic Reunion from Kent. And a Faithless Looting. He's just going through his deck looking for
A blue source
blue
to hard
source,
cast
yeah.
Narcomoeba.
He's got Frank down to 5. He could start casting Stinkweed Imps.
Yes.
Spellskite. Okay, a blocker from Frank. That will keep him alive for a turn. But I believe Kent has Abrupt Decay in hand.
Well, yep, and he has the requisite mana for that one.
Faithless Looting again from Ketter. Finds Mana Confluence.
That'll unlock this Narcomoeba should that matter for some reason. Vanderwall could have a Path to Exile in hand, something like that. Get him through the turn.
Abrupt Decay on the Spellskite for Ketter. Is that going to do it? We look at Frank Vanderwall's hand. Yeah.
I think I saw another Rest in Peace in Vanderwall's hand.
So Kent Ketter with Dredge beating 2 Rest in Pieces and a Grafdigger's Cage. Now, to be fair, those are just about all the cards. But it turns out a 3/3 on turn 5. Turn 5, I believe it was. Carried
Yeah.
it for Kent.
And when we talk about Prized Amalgam making Dredge so much better, it's not just the fact that it's like the best engine card. It's also their first actual reasonable body to just hard cast when they have to beat Graveyard Hate.